Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. My guest today is writer-artist Rick Parker. Rick, welcome to Comic Culture.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Terrence. It's a pleasure to be here.
Rick, you have a long and storied career in comics, but you are still creating new and interesting books today. And I understand you've got a new book that's just about to be released, or if it hasn't been released already, called Drafted. So can you tell us a little bit about that particular book?
This is the first book that I have both illustrated and written, and I've been working in comics for 50 years. So I would advise anybody, if there's something you want to do, don't wait till you're 70 to start working on it. But yeah, it's a story. It's a true story of a young kid from Georgia who gets drafted into the Army during the height of the Vietnam War. And that was me. That kid was me.
Now, I saw on one of your social media posts that there's some stuff in this that is really uncomfortable. I think there's a scene where your character has to crawl through a tunnel, but is going through backwards.
Oh, yeah, I refused to go down there head first because there was a lot of dead animals, and I think somebody had urinated into the thing or pooped into it. I don't know, but I went down there feet first, and then when I entered the tunnel, I had to crawl feet first through the tunnel. Not the smartest move I've ever made, but I got out. Somebody helped me out at the end. There were a lot of uncomfortable things in that book, Terrence, but that's probably number 17 on the list, actually.
So what makes you go back and look at that particular time in your life? I mean, it was, I guess, about 50 years ago or so, maybe a little bit more.
It was 55 years ago. I worked in comics from starting about 1977. And after a few years, I kind of fell in love with comics. I was really, when I went to New York, I was going to be a painter or a sculptor. And I was getting my work in shows, and I was doing good work, but I could never make any money at it. So I had met a girl who worked at Marvel Comics, and when I went up there with her one time, I thought, wow, what a great place to work. And but I didn't want to try to compete with somebody who I was dating. But anyway, she got married and moved to Arizona. So, and then I realized, wow, maybe I could go up there and they'd give me a job. But I was still thinking of Marvel as just a place to make money. I wasn't really I read comics and comic newspaper strips and things like that when I was a kid, but my ambition was not to be a comic book artist. But I love the stuff, but I hadn't really read comics since I was a teenager. But after a number of years and working at Marvel, I just got more and more interested in comics, and I kind of fell in love with it. And I was lettering the Spider-Man strip for Stan Lee, and I was getting excited about it. I'd lettered comic books, other comic books, and I won't name any names here, but I didn't get all that excited. But for whatever reason, working on Stan Lee stuff probably had a lot to do with the fact that it was drawn by John Romita, who I thought was everybody acknowledges was one of the great Spider-Man artists. And Stan, of course, was a great writer. And I wanted to do something, so I wanted to do a comic strip. I thought, you can do a lot with a comic strip. So I created a comic strip that I didn't show to anybody. I mean, I wasn't the type of person that wanted to just do something and show it to somebody right away. I was kind of trying to be, more reserved. And but anyway, I kind of always wanted to do something in comics, and I did illustrated a number of, I did the Beavis and Butt Head comic book, which was a great thrill. I'd worked there for 15 years at the time I got that project, and it was a great experience for me. But somehow, it's just not the same as when you write the material and illustrate it yourself, So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I worked with Harvey Pekar in 2009 and 2010. I was one of the artists that was illustrating stories for Harvey, and I realized, wow, I'd like to do something autobiographical. And I looked at my own life. I was about 70 at the time, and I thought, well, the Army was a very interesting period. I was a young man then, and there was a lot of change that took place in my own way of looking at the world. And even when I was in the Army, there were many times in which I was experiencing things that I was thinking, this is unbelievable. I'm going to have to tell somebody about this one day. I'm gonna have to write a book about this or something. Little did I know it was going to take me 50 years and it would be, a comic book. But I spent about I spent a couple of years practicing my figure drawing because I wasn't really all that comfortable with my figure drawing. So before I started on the project, I had written, I have a blog with 150 autobiographical stories, and many of them had to do with the Army. So I just took some of those stories that I had already written several years earlier and adapted them into comic books, into, words and pictures. It took me about 5 years, I guess, to finish the project. And I work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. So very labor intensive because I have to do other things. You got to walk the dogs and buy groceries and things like that. But it was a lot of work, and it felt really good to finally get something of my own created. Because I always wanted to do something of my own, and now that I've had a taste of what it's like to create my own book, I'd like to try to do another one and another one. As long as I can keep going, because it's taken me a long time to find what was right for me. I'm very grateful to have found that before it's too late.
One thing that I find so interesting about comics is that you can tell just about any story that you want. Now, you mentioned that you had written up a number of these experiences as blog posts. So as you are adapting something that is, I'm going to read it and there's the description in it, versus I'm going to condense that down to the 6 or 7 images that will make the most sense on this page with just the right words that are going to fill in that gap that is required. So how do you kind of shift gears from what we would consider the prose style writing to the cartoonist style writing, where it's pictures and words in combination?
Well, that is an excellent question, and I wish I had an easy answer for it. The only thing I can say is that I think that I'm blessed. I have a great intuition in terms of creative stuff. And, I didn't go to school to study, comic art or anything like that. I guess I would, read the material, and I was very familiar with it. And you'd get an image in your head of something that you thought you wanted to draw. And then I would see which of these words can I leave out. If the information is conveyed in the picture, you don't really need to have the words to reinforce that. There are a million different ways you could do it, too. I mean, well, I might not do the same exact thing, in the morning of one day that I would have done a day later. It just depends on a lot of things that are going on at that time. But it's it's doable. It's a doable. Try not to repeat the same. There's no really need to. I try to use as few words as possible to communicate as much information as possible. What I discovered about myself was that I'm not good at taking something complicated and making it simple. What I'm good at is I'm good at taking something simple and making it very complicated. The whole thing's a learning process. The more you do of anything, the more you learn, and hopefully I won't say easy is not the word. Easier it becomes is not the word, but the more confident you become and the decisions that you make. And it really is, it's about you have to make a million little decisions. And some of them you don't even realize that you're making them as you're making them. My approach is very intuitive, as opposed to trying to plan everything out very carefully and then go ahead and then do that. I have this kind of just throw myself in there and see what happens approach. I don't recommend that this is the best way for other people to work. I think everybody has to find his or her own way of working. What works best for you, that's what you should do. But the stuff that I described is kind of the way I work. But my process is constantly evolving. A lot of changes took place once I started using it. When computers came in, I stopped drawing everything on one piece of paper. Prior to that, all the pages were on one piece of paper. But I started drawing separate figures and scanning them and then adding them and moving them around in the frame and overlapping and stuff like that.
The digital art sphere has given creators so many new tools that we can tap into. I mean, in the old days, if you screwed up one panel, you either had to start from scratch for the whole page, or you had to cut and paste something physically, literally, a piece of paper on top of that image that you messed up to fix
Right.
that. Are you ever tempted, as you are working digitally, to just, it's never good enough, as you're working, and you have to sort of push yourself away from, this panel's good enough for now, and I can move on to the rest of the story.
I've learned that perfection can sometimes be the enemy of the good. And I think that one of the nice things about comics is it's a storytelling medium. So I think you have to have a good story, and I think you have to tell the story well. But as far as the art goes, I think that the readers, fortunately, the readers cut you a lot of slack. That, I mean, I can't draw as well as a lot of the artists who are working today, but I think that if I can tell the story and people don't get confused as they're reading the story, and they don't look at the figure on panel 20, page 25 and say, wait a minute, is that the same guy that I was looking at 3 pages earlier? You got to keep things moving along. And if I'm not happy with something, I'll redraw it. Or if something's not working, a panel is not working for me, I'll redraw it. But what I mean by working for me is, if I'm drawing a scene and it gives me the same feeling that I had or that I was hoping for, or reminds me of the situation that I was actually in, if it feels right to me, that's good enough. And also, if there's something about the art that's bothering me, I'll redraw a figure or something like that. I mean, I try to, within reason, to make it. I've got to please myself. If I expect anybody else is going to like this, I've got to like it myself first. Hopefully, do something that you love, and hopefully, maybe somebody else will at least like it.
Now, you talk about characters and trying to be consistent throughout. One of the toughest things for even the best artist is trying to create a character that has, a certain body language and, I guess, a way of acting. So as you were, I guess, starting this project, did you see that evolution in your own characters, that maybe you connected with them a little bit more, and maybe the buddy is going to be drawn a certain way because that reflects his personality? Was it sort of that organic thing, or was it something where perhaps you're consciously saying, okay, I want to differentiate between the characters by giving them their own nuances and their own behaviors?
I just drew the figures in a way that, that sort of, it seemed to work for me. I didn't really consciously put a lot of thought into it. One of the nice things about doing a book about being in the Army is that, like, I got to draw myself over and over again, and I was pretty familiar with, drawing myself. I had that part down pat. Everybody's wearing pretty much the same clothes all the time, so I didn't have to worry about a million different kind of costumes and things like that. So there were some things, I think, that made it that I didn't have to worry about too much, and that was the costumes and things like that. I remember when I was working at Marvel and I was lettering a Transformers job, and I remember thinking, oh my God, this poor artist has got to draw all these complicated, characters from all these different angles. But my story has a lot of people in it. It's got some machinery in it, and people that are looking at stories of army, they're going to expect a rifle to look like a rifle. So I mean, I wasn't too cartoony there, but it's my work is kind of a mixture, I think, in between cartoony and realistic, some hybrid of that. But yeah, if it felt right to me, I would just go on to the next page.
And you mentioned having to letter a page of Transformers where you have all these different characters. I had the pleasure of speaking with Tom Orzechowski a few years back, and he was talking about when you letter a page that the superheroes, out of their costume, but they're in their civilian garb, you never cover their hair, because the hairstyle is how the reader will know that that's Wolverine versus Cyclops. So when you were lettering a page, did you have sort of the same philosophy of how to make sure that the readers understood which character is which, or was this sort of something that was passed down generation to generation at Marvel?
Well, fortunately, for the most part, I would say that Marvel, the quality of the artists that worked at Marvel Comics, they were all really good at their jobs, and they knew that they had to leave a certain amount of space at the top of. Generally, the lettering is above the figures. At the top of the page, there was generally enough space, and I lettered as small as I could without it being ridiculously small. All of my superhero lettering was done, with using an Ames guide to draw guidelines so that the lettering wasn't all over the place the way it was say when I was doing Beavis and Butt Head, I dispensed with the Ames guide completely and had more of a free-form, organic lettering style that didn't use any guidelines at all. The artwork is there, and you just have to look at it. You don't want to cover anyone's uh, head for sure, and the hair on a person's head. If you draw two ovals on a piece of paper and you put two different hairstyles on them, it automatically starts leading people into thinking that, well, oh, this is Elvis Presley and this other person is Jesus, or whatever. The hair is one of the things that people notice right away. It helps distinguish who that character is. And it's one of the most important features, actually. If I started drawing a picture of somebody, I would immediately look at the shape of the person's face. Some people have more elongated heads, but some people, it seems like their eyes are maybe not halfway down, but a little bit lower. You don't want to exaggerate. I don't like to exaggerate too much to make it really caricature, looking. But the hair is really important. And at first, I didn't know how to draw hair. I remember a lot of the first characters that I started drawing in comics were like the Watcher, for example. He was the first character I remember drawing, and I picked him because he didn't have any hair, because I wasn't really sure how to draw hair. When I went to school to study art, I learned how to draw things by looking at them and drawing what I was looking at. And that's really not how comic artists work. They have lots of different styles. Some people are doing characters, you can tell they're trying to make them look like real people. And then there's Jack Kirby, who did comic characters that yes, you could tell that they were based on real people, but they were comic book characters. They were pure comic book characters. There weren't people in the real world that looked like that, but that was okay because it was a comic.
No, it's great to hear stuff like that, because there's a lot of that goes into a comic page, and I think we tend to think of lettering as not as important as, let's say, Jack Kirby's layout on that page, or what John Romita is doing with that Spider-Man figure. But we do read the lettering, and it has to be done just right. So as you are going from being one of the top letterers at Marvel, working on Spider-Man, whether it's the newspaper strip or the comic, how do you sort of make that pivot into convincing them that you are the right person to take over a new licensed property like Beavis and Butt Head?
When I was lettering for Marvel, if I'd finished a job, and I'd call up the company and tell them that it's okay, send a messenger down, I finished this. And while I was waiting for the messenger to come, I had the pages all inside of an 11 by 17 manila envelope. And in the beginning, I just would write the editor's name on there that the envelope was supposed to be delivered to. But then there was plenty of extra space on the envelope, so I just started doodling, funny pictures on there, because I've always liked to draw from the time that I was a little kid. But my style was more humor style, not superhero art. I didn't understand the whole thing with superheroes, because, when I was 18, I think or 16, it was when Spider-Man came out, and I'd already stopped reading comic books at that time. So I grew up in kind of the Mad Magazine tradition, but I used to always do a lot of drawings and show them to, on the envelopes. And one day I went up to Marvel, and they had these envelopes. They'd ripped off the drawing I did, and they were plastering them up on the bulletin board or on the filing cabinets. And I thought, wow. Anyway, there was a young assistant editor there who said, "Hey, I really like your work, and if I ever get to be an editor here, I'd like to work with you." And he was a funny guy. So when Marvel got the license to do Beavis and Butt Head comic book, they hired him to be the editor of it. And because he was the person that liked my work, I got to be that artist. But there were a few people at Marvel who could have done a great job on it, I think. Marie Severin was working there at the time. She's a great cartoonist. Alan Kupperberg was there, and I think that they could have chosen him. Hilary Barta was a freelancer for Marvel in those days. He could have done a great job on it. But I was there, at the office, and there's no substitute for being right there where people can see you. And that probably gave me an advantage. But he expressed an interest in wanting to work with me, and that was great. Finally, something came along that I was well suited for. But what I tell young artists, and if they'll listen, and when you get to be an old guy, you start wanting to give advice to everybody, especially the young people. So here's the advice that I would tell people: do not wait for somebody to discover you. Do not wait for somebody to recognize that you've got something to offer. Do not wait to be invited or picked or chosen to do work on a project. Figure out who you are, what kind of an artist you are, what you've got to, or writer and artist, and what you've got to offer, and how you would do something, and then just go ahead and give yourself permission to just do that and make it as good as it can possibly be. So rather than wait to be invited to the party, you become the party yourself. And if you do anything good, somebody will recognize that, and they will want you to do more of that type of thing. But most people I don't know about most people. I was always waiting for somebody to discover me. I was always waiting for somebody to say, "Oh, look what he can do." But just go ahead and do it, and make it the best that you can, and hopefully somebody will like it.
I wanted to ask you about, I mean, Beavis and Butthead at the time are huge media figures, making not only great ratings on MTV, but the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, and now their own comic series. And I know that the first year or so, the series is selling huge numbers. So when you are working on a book that has that high of a profile, is there a lot of input from, let's say, Viacom, the parent company of the characters, or are you just free to, as long as they look good enough, we're not going to get in the way?
Yeah, I was surprised at how little that they wanted to become involved with it. The thing that seemed to me that the only thing that was important to them was that the characters were on model. As long as it looked like the characters, they didn't seem to care what you did with it. And so I've always been the type of person that liked to go out on the limb to see how far I could go before it would break. And so I kept, wanting to see what I can get away with here. And especially I think it was like issue 26 when I found out that the series was going to be canceled, and the last issue would be 28. So issues 26, 27, and 28, I took chances and did things that I thought, well, this is really, some of these things might border on being inappropriate. But the thing that I realized with the general public is that especially something like Beavis and Butthead, there's nothing you can do that they just want you to put your foot down and on the accelerator and hold it to the floor. When I first started doing this, I thought people are going to think, oh, you're a bad person, or I don't let my son read your comic. Or nothing could have been further from the truth. You can't do enough for the couple. And of course, after Beavis and Butthead, they came out with Family Guy, and Family Guy is just. I was shocked by some of the stuff that I saw on Family Guy. I grew up in the 1950s. They didn't have things like that on television.
So we have just a couple of minutes left before we have to wrap up our conversation.
Okay.
So I know that your project, Drafted, is available for sale on websites like Amazon. If the folks watching at home wanted to find out more about you, where can they find you on the web?
I've got a great Facebook page that I've been working on like it's a regular job for about 15 or 16 years. You just Google Rick Parker cartoonist, and it'll come up. And my book is available wherever books are sold. I mean, you can buy it in any bookstore. Will have it. Just ask for it. If they don't have it, they can get it for you.
And do you have any projects that you're considering for the near future? Anything that you want to hype?
Yes. Well, my book Drafted was supposed to come out in 2023 or 2022, and when it didn't come out, rather than spend a lot of time pouting, I just decided I'm just going to start on another project. So I started on a story which I'm calling The Artiste, and it's a story of a young artist that goes to New York to seek his fame and fortune. He knew that he wanted to be an artist, but he wasn't sure what kind of artist he was going to be. But he felt that, he would be able to, to succeed as an artist, and New York was the place to go. And that I'm pretty much finished writing the book and doing all the layouts on the book. And I previewed some of the pages on my Facebook page if people wanted to see what that looks like, or on Threads. It's called The Artiste, and it's the story of a young artist that goes to New York. And I've been working on that since December of 22, and it's looking really good. Hoping to finish that sometime next year.
That seems like it's the spiritual sequel to Drafted.
Yes, except my life was really about being an artist, not so much about being a soldier. But I like the soldier story because it has a beginning, middle, and an end. You know, it started pretty much when I was a kid, and when I got out, that was it. And you know, this other book covers a 25-year period in when I was in New York, and so the drafted book was 3 years and it 250 pages. So a book of 25 years, I figure is going to be about 700 or 856 pages. So I'm going to have to make sure that the editor helps me like decide what parts to leave out.
Rick, they are telling us that we are out of time. I wanted to thank
Yeah.
you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us today.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I look forward to seeing you sometime in person.
I'd like to thank everyone at home for watching Comic Culture. We will see you again soon.